Don't you think we should order now, ma'am? Lily hit her lips nervously as she thought of what response to give. They were all starving, and for the past 2.5 hours, they'd been waiting on the meal Asher promised, but it wasn't forthcoming. Her eyes fact to the phone, and she tapped it awake, thinking she might have missed a text from him telling her he couldn't prepare the meal anymore. But there was nothing. Was he trying to pay her back for canceling? He wouldn't go that far, right? Sighing, she looked at the faces of her hungry teammates. They've been here for at least 5 hours, and they all have been working non-stop piecing ideas together for the project. It would be totally unfair to keep them waiting when they've already waited this long. I'm sorry for keeping you all waiting for so long, she finally said, and she could see the anticipation on their faces as they waited for her to finish her statement. I'm going to order something for us now. We can wrap up after our dinner. Relief immersion washed over their faces, their previously tense shoulders relaxed and slumped. Shooting a forced smile at them, she picked up her phone and walked away to place the order. She thought of reaching out to Asher to inquire about what happened but instantly decided against it. But just as she was about to call the order line, the doorbell rang, and her heart skipped a few. I'll get it, she said, a bit too excitedly when she heard one of them stand up to go get the door. Her lips immediately thinned and she stared at the floor when she noticed the teasing and questioning looks on their faces at her outburst. Be right back. She hurried off to the door and pulled it open just as the person was about to ring the doorbell again. Her brows scrunched up at the unfamiliar face that stood before her, holding bags of food. Hi, good day, are you Lily Allard? She nodded. Yes, I am. Is everything okay? Yes, ma'am. These were ordered for you. He brought the bags of food to her face, and she instantly drew back before she skeptically took them from him and looked inside. Please sign here. She did as she was told, and with one final nod, the driver walked away. She stood a little while longer after he drove away, recollecting herself from the disappointment that she was feeling. She thought he was going to deliver it himself. Her phone chimed with 2 notifications, snapping her back to reality, and she finally walked in to give the food to others. Once she set the food down and motioned for them to dig in, she stepped aside to check her notifications. The hairs on her body immediately stood erect when she saw her dad's name. He sent her a text. He never does, unless it's something really important. And whatever was important to him at the time was detrimental to her. Her palms suddenly got sweaty as she thought of all the possible things he could be texting her for, and how she'd have to decline if it'll interfere with her work. It's just a text, she chanted, but she knew it wasn't just a text. Swallowing, she finally swiped on the message, opening it. Your sister is in the hospital, Overview Hospital. Be here in 10 minutes. How on earth did she land herself in a freaking hospital? She shrieked and immediately went in search of her car keys. I'll be heading out first, feel free to enjoy your dinner, and head home for a needed rest afterwards. Thank you all for today, she said to the team as she hurriedly packed her bag. Without waiting for a response, she dashed out of the house and got into her car. Her mind raced with different thoughts as she made her way over there. In exactly 10 minutes, she pulled into the hospital's parking lot. Taking a deep breath, she prepared herself for whatever she was going to encounter in there. Chances are she would get blamed for whatever happened to Charlotte despite not being involved or having even known of it prior. That was how things worked with her family. Her composure was however knocked out of her when she walked out of her car and saw one of Asher's car parked in the lot. Her steps slowed down considerably as she checked out the car to confirm if it was truly Asher's. It was. Did they call for him? Her husband before her? Is that why? She closed her eyes and shook her head. It can't be. The Asher that possibly spent all right fixing Charlotte's mess wouldn't do this. The Asher that set up a date for them wouldn't just leave her hanging without letting her in on what was going on. She clenched her fists and looked away from the car. It wasn't Asher's. That was what she decided as she walked away, heading into the hospital. Her father was the first person she saw when she walked in, and the look in his hooded eyes told her all she needed to know. Whatever happened to Charlotte was now her fault, and there was nothing she could do about it. Where are you coming from? Mr. Morgan bellowed. The second B set eyes on Lily PM. She gulped and made to answer him. He however cur in with another question. Where were you all the while your sister was in here fighting for her life? Lazing around in the Allard mansion, right? Lily's hands clenched tightly beside her, and she bit hard on the insides of her cheeks. Can't you be more sympathetic towards your sister, Lily? You're the reason she left the house in the first place, and now that she's back you are still making things so difficult. Can't you be more who? I did nothing to Charlotte, she cut in sharply, and Mr. Morgan's eyes widened. I didn't even know of this till 10 minutes ago, so how on earth did Her words died down in her mouth, and all the energy to defend herself sapped out of her the second she caught sight of Asher walking out of the hospital room, looking distraught. It really was his car. He left her hanging. Her own family called her husband before her. She felt father, and he stared back at her with accusing eyes. Tears pool in her eyes, and she dragged her gaze away from Asher to get a good look at her. Would there ever come a time where those eyes of his weren't accusing her? A time where he'd finally accept that she was part of his family and not some outsider. She bit her trembling lower lip and sniffled, nodding her head. My regards to Charlotte. I hope she recovers well, she said, and walked away despite her father yelling at her to come back. She had no place there, and she wasn't going to act like she did. The meeting with her parents ended better than she expected, and she didn't need a soothsayer to tell her that it was because of Asher's presence. Charlotte also looked in better shape than she expected, and she was extremely grateful to God for that. Thank you for being with me, Lily said, as they both walked out of the hospital. Asher shot her a smile in response, and they both quietly walked over to the parking lot, stopping only when they got to Lily's car. TM going to head back to the company. I have a few meetings to wrap up. She nodded, and he copied her movements, urging her to get into the car. Once she was in and locked, he gave a little wave before he walked away. Lily watched till his frame disappeared out of her sight before she drove out of the hospital. She was free for the rest of the day, and she had no idea what to do with her time, so instead of rushing back home, she decided to drive around the city in hopes that she'll eventually think of something tangible to do with her time. As she was driving through the city, taking notes of things she has seen over a gazillion times, her eyes caught sight of a toy store, and Asher's story from last night came pouring into her mind, bringing with it a fresh idea. She immediately parked by the road and got off, heading into the store with a renewed excitement and a rush of adrenaline. He said it has been 14 years, right? She mused as she walked through the store, picking out whatever car and figurine caught her attention. She came across a card section, and she picked out a whole bunch of them. He said he collected way beyond toys and figurines. Her face lit up in excitement, and she decided then and there to shop for even more collectibles. At least 2 hours later, she went back home with bags and bags of things she assumed Asher would love to have in his collection, and she was partially regretting it because she had no clue how to present them to him. They were so much she couldn't exactly go, "Here, I got you some collectibles." She dumped everything on the dining table before she plopped down on one of the chairs and sighed heavily, her eyes fixed on the bags before her. It was a start idea to make it a treasure hunt, but they seemed too much for a treasure. She clapped her hand out of the blue and sat up, cutting her thoughts short as another plopped into her mind. The name is Treasure Hunt for a reason. Treasures usually aren't small, they are typically numerous, and this was numerous. She clapped her hands excitedly, smiling as the earlier exhaustion seemed to wash away from her bones. She quickly retrieved her phone and Googled how to create one before she beckoned on the maids for help. This was going to be a fun time for everyone involved. The minute they all gathered, everyone got to work. They picked out the rooms and places where the treasures will be hidden, then they spent an ample time placing it there before they all gathered round to create and write out the hints and questions. That ended up being the part that took up most of their time, but when they eventually finished with it, a smug satisfaction filled each and every single one of them. Lily stared at the papers sprawled out on the table and smiled in satisfaction. She took in the smiling and proud faces of the help, and a strange warmth engulfed her. This was it. This was all she ever wanted. This peace, this moment. She brought out her phone and immediately took a picture, immortalizing the moment for her own peace. They went on afterwards to organize how everything will go. When all was eventually all set and done, Lily helped the chefs prepare a meal for everyone. She freshened up afterwards and then sent a text to Asher, urging him to come home on time. Asher, who was about to head to his next meeting, immediately adjourned it the second he got Lily's text. She was not one to tell him when to or not to come back, and it sent his nerves spiraling as he thought of everything that could have gone wrong. He dismissed everything else he had to do for the day and immediately left the company, actively going against the speed limit just so he could get back on time. He was greeted by one of the helps holding a piece of paper the second he got home, and his heart sank. He felt his knees grow weak, and he stylishly leaned on the wall for support to avoid falling face flat on the floor. All the adrenaline has worn off and he was suffering it, and to make it all worse, the maid holding out the piece of paper reminded him of Lily leaving the first time, and he needed time to prepare himself for whatever may be in there. "Did Lily give you this to paper from her? To give me?" he asked when he finally caught his breath, and she nodded. He rubbed his lips together, nodding as he took the second he took the paper, she turned on her heels and disappeared. Asher stared at the piece of paper for a little while before he took a deep breath and opened it. "Welcome to our treasure hunt. It is a pleasure to have you here. However, we present you with a choice, to be or not to be. If you wish to not be, kindly walk up and all this will be forgotten, but if you are confident enough to unravel the mysteries, follow the trail of leaves and vines to a place where growth and beauty entwine." His brows shot up as he read through the note, and a corner of his lips curled up in a smirk. Lily, he tucked the note into his pocket, rolled up his shirt sleeves, and his smirk widened. Game on. Asher, please wait. Lily called out, running to catch up to him, but he neither answered nor stopped. Asher, can you please hold on? I want to apologize. He played deaf to her words, hurrying to his room. Lily quickly caught onto his intention to disappear into his room and instantly hastened her steps and managed to squeeze herself in right on time before he shut the door behind him. Asher, please. She grabbed his arm and walked around to meet his gaze. I am so. Her words slowly died down on her lips when she noticed his glossy eyes. Asher, please leave. Lily, she shook her head, tightening her hold on him. Asher, your eyes are glow. Her sentence was interrupted when he suddenly fell to his knees, his breath coming out in pants. Lily's eyes immediately widened and they immediately crouched to his level. Asher, what's wrong? She held his face and tapped his cheeks in panic. Asher, Ashery, please take deep breaths. Deep breaths, please. Asher struggled to hear her over the sound of his own breathing and the ringing in his cars. His vision was blurry, and the person he was sure was Lily a minute ago suddenly seemed like his mother, and she was. Asher. Lily's scream jolted his mind, and the person was once again Lily, although blurry. He could tell it was her now. Please take a deep breath, please. No, think of a color. 3 colors. Red, pink, orange. Think of them. He struggled to draw a proper breath in, but after several attempts, he finally felt like he could breathe again, but he was exhausted. Each breath he took felt like strength was getting sapped out of him, and he was struggling to hold on to Il. Lily sighed deeply and slumped against the floor. The adrenaline and fear rooted in her body a while ago disappeared and was replaced with exhaustion, but she refused to let go of him. They both stayed on the floor, each trying to recover their strength and pry off the bone-aching exhaustion they felt. Lily was the first to recover. Come, let's get you to bed. With great difficulty she was able to get his body off the floor, and with even greater difficulty she managed to drag him to the bed and helped him lie down. Once he was settled, a deep sigh left Lily's lips and she squatted before him, taking in all his features. Her chest squeezed painfully inside of her when she realized she was the reason all of this happened, but at the same time she couldn't understand why she shook her head, burying the thoughts into the back of her mind. She bit the insides of her cheeks as she gently reached for his hand and held it softly. I'm so sorry, Asher. I shouldn't have gone that far to prank you. I'm really sorry. She mumbled, caressing his hand softly with her thumbs. I'm so sorry. She smiled through the tears forming in her eyes. After staring at him for a little longer, she sighed and placed his hand properly on the bed before she stood up. I'm going to let you rest now. I'll come and see you later. She gave him a tight-lipped smile and was about to walk away when she felt his hand enclasp around her wrist. 5 stay. Lily's brows shot up and she turned to get a better look at him, and Asher was staring at her through hooded eyes, his breaths coming out in pants. She gulped and opened her mouth to say something, but he immediately cut her off. Just stay. Lily, please. She rubbed her lips together, deliberating on if she should agree or not. Asher, sensing her hesitation, adjusted on the bed and tapped the side beside him. Please stay with me. Lily, his plea instantly melted away all of her hesitation, and she got into bed with him. She thought they'd just lay beside each other, but Asher debunked her assumptions by wrapping his arm around her, and her eyes instantly widened, but before she could react, he pulled her closer to himself. I thought I almost lost you today, Lily. Lily's heart skipped a few beats at his words, and she placed her hand on her chest as if to placate her heart, to stop it from beating right out of her. I am sorry. Moments of silence passed as their breathing slowed down and soon marched each other's pace. Being held in his arms felt natural, it felt like safety, and soon enough, Lily was melting into his hold. Warmth spread through Asher's chest when he realized she was leaning into him. Holding her felt like everything he's ever wanted, and he was glad she felt the same. Can I ask you a question? Lily asked, breaking the silence, and Asher hummed in response. She tucked her bottom lips in between her teeth and bit on it as she thought over her question. Finally, she expelled a breath and looked up to get a good look at his face. You don't have to answer if it's too difficult. Asher's shows knitted together suspiciously, and he held her gaze for a few seconds longer before he slowly bobbed his head. His curiosity spiked on what her question would be. Is there any other reason why you got so scared when you saw me drowning? Asher's eyes immediately went blank as if a bitter memory passed through his mind, and Lily instantly regretted asking the question. It's just that you got a panic attack from that, and you don't answer it. You don't have to answer it. I don't even want to know anymore. He breathed out and pulled her closer to himself. Do you have time to hear my sob story? Lily slowly nodded, meeting his gaze. Well, here goes nothing. He took a deep and shaky breath, preparing himself to recollect one of his most painful memories. It is my mum, she died by drowning.